The midday sun spilled through the tall glass windows of the downtown financial district, reflecting off marble floors and casting sharp light across a line of customers waiting to be served. The air inside the branch of Sterling Bank felt thick with quiet chatter, the click of heels, and the faint sound of printers whirring behind the counter. Everything about the place exuded a certain formality, neatly pressed suits, polished counters, and the kind of polite detachment that came with money. At the back of the line stood a woman in her late 30s, her posture straight, her eyes calm. Her name was Lauren Pierce. She wore a charcoal grey business dress, a leather tote slung over one shoulder, and small gold earrings that caught the light when she moved. Her hair was tied neatly, and her presence carried a quiet authority, though she didn't draw attention to herself. She wasn't one to announce who she was. She'd never needed to. She had come to the branch for something simple. To make a withdrawal for a business purchase, she preferred not to run through the company account. It was supposed to take 10 minutes, maybe 15. But as she looked at the line inching forward, she noticed how the tellers greeted certain customers with polished smiles while barely acknowledging others. She saw the way the manager, a man in his 40s with a tight expression and a louder-than-necessary voice, kept glancing at her every so often. She felt it, the subtle sorting of people that always happened in spaces like this. When her turn came, she stepped forward to the counter. The teller, a young woman named Lisa, greeted her with a perfunctory smile. "How can I help you today?" Lauren returned the smile politely. "I'd like to make a withdrawal from my account, please. A significant amount, so I'd prefer it in cash." Lisa blinked, her fingers pausing above the keyboard. "Of course. Can I see your ID and account information?" Lauren handed over her ID and debit card. The teller typed the account number and paused. "You said a significant amount. How much are we talking?" "50,000, Lauren said calmly. Lisa's eyebrows lifted slightly. "In cash?" "Yes," Lauren said. "In cash." The teller forced a small smile, trying to mask her surprise. "All right, just a moment." She walked to the manager's office, holding the ID in her hand. From where Lauren stood, she could see the exchange. Lisa leaning in, whispering something to the manager, and both of them glancing discreetly in her direction. The manager frowned, shook his head, and then got up, buttoning his suit jacket as he approached the counter. "Good afternoon," he said, his tone polished but cool. "I'm Stephen, the branch manager. I understand you're requesting a withdrawal of $50,000? "Yes," Lauren replied evenly. "From my personal account." He gave a small, tight smile. "That's quite a large amount to take in cash. May I ask what it's for?" She met his eyes calmly. "Personal reasons. Is that an issue?" He gave a dry chuckle. "Not necessarily. We just have to verify the request. You understand, it's not every day someone walks in asking for that much cash." "I imagine it isn't," she said, her tone still polite. "But I assume it's within your daily authorization limit." Stephen hesitated, slightly taken aback by her composure. "It is," he said. "However, we'll need to confirm the source of funds and... Forgive me, but this account doesn't appear to have the transaction volume typical of such withdrawals." Lauren tilted her head slightly. "Are you suggesting the account balance isn't sufficient?" "No," he said quickly. "I'm suggesting we may need to ensure it isn't a flagged transaction." A man in line behind her muttered, "Probably fraud. People try this stuff all the time." A few others chuckled softly, not cruelly, but with that same careless disbelief that came from habit. Lauren heard them but didn't react. She simply looked at Stephen. "Would you like to check the account history?" "You'll find the balance easily covers the withdrawal." Stephen smiled thinly, as if humoring her. "Of course. Please wait a moment." He took her ID and card, walking back to the computer station. Lisa hovered nearby, whispering something he ignored. After a moment, his expression shifted slightly as he stared at the screen. The numbers were clear, 8 figures across several linked accounts. He blinked, then glanced back toward her, uncertainty flickering across his face. But instead of apologizing, he said, "This must be a company-linked account. I'll need to confirm authorization." Lauren clasped her hands calmly on the counter. "You're welcome to call whoever you like. The authorization will come through immediately." Stephen picked up the phone, his voice low but tense, as he spoke to someone at regional headquarters. Lauren waited quietly, her posture composed, her gaze steady. Around her, the line murmured, the sound of keyboards and conversations continuing like a distant hum. A few moments later, Stephen's expression froze. His tone shifted from brisk to confused. "Wait, she's who?" he said into the receiver. Then silence. His eyes darted to Lauren, his face pale now. "Yes, sir. I understand. I understand completely." He hung up slowly, his hand still resting on the receiver. The teller looked at him, puzzled. "What's wrong?" He turned toward her, his voice low but audible. "Get the withdrawal ready, immediately." Lauren's expression didn't change. She looked almost patient, as if this wasn't the first time she'd watched someone realize who she was. Stephen cleared his throat, straightening his tie. "Miss Pierce," he said carefully now, his tone stripped of its earlier arrogance. I wasn't aware you were the owner," she said, her voice calm but sharp enough to cut the air. "Yes, the majority shareholder and CEO of Sterling Financial Group, the same corporation that oversees this bank." The room went silent. The man who had muttered earlier stared at her, his face red. Lisa froze mid-motion, the envelope in her hand trembling slightly. Lauren's tone didn't rise. She didn't gloat. She simply said, "I didn't come here to prove a point. I came here to make a withdrawal like any other customer. But perhaps this moment serves as a reminder that respect should never depend on the numbers in someone's account." Stephen swallowed hard, his voice small now. "You're absolutely right, Miss Pierce. My sincerest apologies." She nodded once. "Apologies are a start. But the culture you build inside these walls, that's what really matters." When the teller returned with the envelope, Lauren accepted it, tucked it into her purse, and offered a polite smile. "Thank you. I trust the next person who walks in won't have to defend their right to be here." Then she turned and walked toward the exit, her heels clicking steadily against the marble floor. No one spoke. Even the sound of keyboards had stopped. As the doors closed behind her, the silence inside the branch felt heavier than before, like a lesson everyone had just been forced to learn. The next morning, the Sterling Financial Group headquarters was already alive with motion before sunrise. On the 42nd floor, the skyline of the city reflected against the mirrored glass of Lauren's corner office, where she stood alone, coffee in hand, watching the streets come alive below. She was dressed in a navy blue suit now, her hair pinned neatly, her expression calm as always. No one looking at her would have guessed that less than 24 hours ago she had been mistaken for someone who didn't belong in her own bank. Her assistant, Rachel, entered quietly, holding a tablet. "Morning, Miss Pierce. You have back-to-back meetings starting at 9 and—" She hesitated. "There's been some chatter about what happened at the downtown branch yesterday." Lauren didn't turn right away. "I expected there would be. Apparently a few employees posted online that the CEO showed up unannounced and caught the staff off guard," Rachel said. "They didn't mention the details, but word spreading internally." Lauren nodded slightly. "Good, let it spread. But make sure the lesson spreads with it." Rachel smiled faintly. "I think it already is." Lauren finally turned, setting her coffee down. "Did you review the internal audit reports for that branch?" "I did. Their compliance record's clean. The issue wasn't policy, it was people." "Exactly," Lauren said. "Policy can be fixed with rules. Culture needs example." She walked to her desk and opened her laptop, pulling up the report from the branch. It looked flawless on paper. Solid numbers, excellent customer retention, above-average loan performance. Yet she could still see the arrogance in that manager's eyes, the way he spoke to her as though money defined worth. It wasn't about one man. It was about the environment that had made him think that was acceptable. At 9 sharp, she stepped into the executive conference room where her senior leadership team waited. The room quieted instantly as she entered. They all knew something was coming. Word traveled fast in Sterling's halls, especially when the story involved the CEO. "Morning, everyone," Lauren said, her tone steady. "Before we begin, I want to address something that happened yesterday." No one moved. A few exchanged uneasy glances. She continued. "I visited one of our branches, the downtown location, on personal business. I requested a withdrawal and was denied without cause. The manager assumed my request was suspicious, not because of any irregularity, but because of me." There was a brief, sharp silence. Lauren folded her hands on the table. "Now, I'm not here to make an example out of him personally, but I'm here to make an example out of what allowed it to happen." This institution was built on trust, yet somewhere along the way we've confused financial assessment with personal judgment. The head of operations, a middle-aged man named Victor, spoke up carefully. "Ms. Pierce, are you suggesting bias training for all staff?" "I'm suggesting something deeper," she said. "I want every employee, from the teller line to the boardroom, to remember why this company exists. We don't hold people's money. We hold their confidence. And that means treating every person who walks into one of our branches with dignity, whether they're depositing $10 or withdrawing $50,000. The room remained quiet as her words sank in. Rachel stepped forward and distributed a printed memo. "Ms. Pierce has prepared a new initiative proposal, Project Integrity. It's not just training. It's a redefinition of customer engagement standards starting at the leadership level," Lauren continued. "We'll rotate executives through frontline positions for a day each month. No announcements, no name badges, no titles. I want every person in management to remember what it feels like to be on the other side of that counter." A murmur of surprise rippled through the room. Victor frowned slightly. "You mean anonymously?" "Yes," she said. "Anonymously. If a manager can't treat someone with respect when they think that person is beneath them, then they don't deserve to lead anyone." She could see the discomfort on some faces, the thoughtful respect on others. She didn't need their approval. Change never started with comfort. After the meeting, Victor approached her quietly. "You're turning one bad experience into a company-wide overhaul," he said. "Most CEOs would have just fired the manager." Lauren looked at him. "If I fired one man, the story would end. But if I fix the culture, it never repeats." That afternoon, she visited the downtown branch again, this time unannounced, but not incognito. When she walked in, every head lifted. Stephen, the manager from the day before, rushed from his office, his expression tight with nerves. "Ms. Pierce, I didn't expect—" "That's usually when lessons last," she said softly. He opened his mouth to apologize again, but she stopped him with a raised hand. "I'm not here for apologies. I'm here for progress. Tell me, how are your team meetings structured?" He blinked. "Weekly performance reviews. We go over sales goals and operations reports. Do you ever discuss how customers are treated?" she asked. He hesitated. "Not directly. That's about to change," she said. "From now on, every branch meeting starts with one story, an act of respect shown to a customer. Not sales, not quotas, respect." Stephen nodded quickly. "Understood." She looked around the lobby. Customers were watching quietly, pretending to browse brochures while stealing glances at her. "You see," she said, addressing the team now, "yesterday I was just another woman trying to access her money. That should have been enough for me to be treated fairly. Not because of who I am, but because of what this institution stands for. Don't forget that." With that, she turned and walked out again, her heels echoing softly against the marble. This time, the silence that followed her wasn't uncomfortable. It was thoughtful. The staff stood a little straighter. The tellers looked their customers in the eye. Back in her car, Lauren leaned back in the seat and finally allowed herself a small, tired smile. She hadn't needed to raise her voice or demand recognition. She had simply reminded them all of something they had forgotten. Real power didn't announce itself. It simply acted, and in doing so, it changed the room. By the end of that week, the quiet ripple that had started at the downtown branch spread through the entire Sterling network. Memos circulated, meetings were called, and managers who had never questioned their approach to customer service were suddenly rethinking the way they spoke, the way they listened, and the way they looked at the people on the other side of the counter. The story of what had happened wasn't officially confirmed, but everyone had heard a version of it. The CEO who walked into her own bank, treated like she didn't belong, and left behind a company-wide reckoning. Lauren didn't discuss it publicly. She didn't need to. Her leadership had always been about example, not announcement. The following Monday, she arrived at the corporate offices early as usual. She didn't take her private elevator to the top floor this time. Instead, she walked straight through the main lobby like any other customer, stopping to greet the reception staff by name. The new posters near the entrance read, "Project Integrity, building respect into every transaction." Beneath the slogan was a simple quote in small print. "Dignity is the only currency that never loses value." Her executive assistant joined her in the elevator, holding a tablet full of reports. The regional directors have already started implementing the new program, Rachel said. Feedback's been incredible. Branches are actually requesting to pilot customer empathy sessions. Some of them even want to bring in clients to talk about their experiences directly. Lauren smiled faintly. Good, that means it's working. They also asked if you plan to make a public statement about the incident. No, Lauren said firmly. If they're focused on my story, they'll miss the point. This isn't about me. It's about everyone who's ever been dismissed, doubted, or talked over when all they wanted was fairness. When she reached her floor, she walked through the open glass doors of her office and found a small bouquet waiting on her desk. No note, no sender. Just fresh lilies in a plain vase. She stood there for a moment, then noticed an envelope tucked beside it. The handwriting was unfamiliar. She opened it and read, "Ms. Pierce, I was the teller who served you last week. I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I needed to say thank you. I learned more in one uncomfortable moment than I have in years on this job. You could have destroyed my confidence that day, but instead, you rebuilt it with grace. I promise I'll never look at another customer the same way again." Lauren read it twice, then folded the note carefully and placed it in her drawer. Her expression softened. "That's how you change a company," she murmured. One heart at a time. That afternoon, she attended a board meeting with the other senior executives. They were all dressed in their usual tailored suits, their language sharp and rehearsed. But when the meeting began, something in the tone had shifted. The head of HR presented updates from the Project Integrity rollout, stories from staff who had seen customers smile more, employees who said they felt more valued, and branches reporting a spike in loyalty metrics. Lauren listened quietly, her hands folded. One of the directors, a man who had always been skeptical of her people-first approach, finally spoke. "Ms. Pierce, I'll admit, when you first proposed this initiative, I thought it was too idealistic. But it's working. Customers are noticing. Employees are proud. It's human." Lauren nodded. "That's the idea. Banking isn't about money. It's about people trusting us with their lives." Another board member, an older woman named Susan, leaned forward. "And how are you, Lauren?" That incident couldn't have been easy. Lauren hesitated, then smiled faintly. "It wasn't pleasant," she said. "But sometimes discomfort is the best teacher. It reminded me why I started this work in the first place." The room fell quiet for a moment. She glanced around at the faces looking back at her, people who managed billions in assets, yet rarely stopped to consider what those numbers meant in real human terms. After the meeting, as the executives filed out, Victor stayed behind. "How you know," he said, closing his folder. "I've been in this business 30 years. I've seen CEOs cut costs, fire teams, push profit margins, but I've never seen one walk into a branch and change the whole company from the inside out." Lauren smiled. "Sometimes it's the small rooms that teach the biggest lessons." Victor nodded. "You really believe that culture can change just by example?" "I don't believe it," she said quietly. "I've seen it." Later that day, she drove past the same downtown branch. Through the glass, she could see Stephen, the manager, standing beside the teller line, greeting customers personally. No suit jacket this time, no forced smile, just genuine attentiveness. She noticed how the tellers seemed more relaxed, how customers lingered to chat instead of rushing out. It looked different now, not in decor, but in energy. She parked a short distance away, watching for a few minutes without going inside. Then she rolled down her window, took a deep breath and smiled to herself. It wasn't about power. It wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about knowing that respect had been restored, not to her name, but to the space she had built for others. As she drove off, her phone buzzed with a message from Rachel. Media outlets caught wind of Project Integrity. "They want a quote from you." Lauren replied simply, "Tell them it's not a story about a CEO, it's a story about respect." She put her phone away and turned onto the main road, the late afternoon light spilling through her windshield. For the first time all week, she allowed herself to exhale fully. She didn't need to explain what had happened or defend why she'd chosen to handle it quietly. The results spoke for themselves. People had changed, not from punishment but from reflection. By the time the city lights flickered on, Sterling Bank had become something new, still powerful, still profitable, but now with something far rarer woven into its foundation: humanity. A month later, the lobby of Sterling Bank's downtown branch looked entirely different. Not because of renovations or new decor, but because of something subtler. The energy had shifted. Customers were greeted warmly, the staff made eye contact, and laughter drifted occasionally from behind the counters. The once stiff professionalism had softened into something genuine. It wasn't forced politeness anymore, it was pride. Lauren walked in quietly that morning, dressed in a simple cream suit, no entourage, no press. She didn't announce her visit. She simply wanted to see what the place had become without her presence hovering above it. The same marble floors gleamed under the morning light, but the people made the difference. The smiles were real. The tone was human. Stephen, the branch manager, spotted her near the entrance and hurried over, but this time his approach wasn't nervous. It was sincere. "Ms. Pierce," he said, smiling. "Good morning. I wasn't expecting you." "That's usually the best time to visit," she said with a small grin. He nodded. "You'll be happy to know we haven't had a single customer complaint in weeks. And the team has been sharing stories at every meeting, just like you asked." "Stories?" she asked. He nodded again. "Small ones. About kindness. About moments when we caught ourselves judging and chose not to. About treating people with respect before we know who they are." Lauren smiled. "So that's the kind of growth you can't buy." He hesitated, then said softly, "I wanted to thank you for not firing me that day." Her expression stayed calm. "I didn't need to. You learned the lesson better than I could have taught it." He exhaled with quiet relief. "It changed me. It changed all of us." Lauren looked around the room, watching a teller help an elderly man fill out a form, another staff member kneeling beside a young mother juggling 2 kids and a stroller. "Then it was worth it," she said. As she turned to leave, Stephen stopped her. "There's something you should see." He gestured to a display near the entrance where a framed photo hung on the wall. It showed a line of Sterling employees smiling outside the branch, holding a banner that read, "Project Integrity. People first, always." Beneath it was a small plaque that read, "Inspired by a customer who reminded us what respect looks like." Lauren studied it for a long moment, then glanced at Stephen. "Who chose that wording?" "The team," he said. "They wanted to honor what happened, but without your name. They said it wasn't about a CEO walking in. It was about a woman who walked in expecting dignity." Her lips curved into a faint, genuine smile. Then they understood perfectly. She left the building soon after, walking into the sunlight with the quiet satisfaction of someone who had seen her work take root. On her way back to headquarters, she passed several other branches bearing the same framed photo near their doors. It had become a symbol within the company, a silent reminder to everyone walking in or out that integrity wasn't a slogan. It was behavior repeated until it became culture. At the office, Rachel met her with a list of upcoming interviews and press inquiries. "They're still asking for you to make a statement," she said. "It's become a national case study in corporate ethics." Lauren shook her head with a soft smile. "No statements. Let the results speak." Rachel paused, then smiled. "You know, people keep saying what you did was bold, but it wasn't loud. That's rare." "Bold doesn't need to be loud," Lauren said simply. "It just needs to be right." That evening, after everyone had gone home, Lauren stayed behind in her office. The city lights glowed outside, painting the glass walls in gold. She poured herself a cup of tea and sat in the stillness, reflecting on how far things had come. Leadership, she thought, wasn't about hierarchy or titles. It was about responsibility, the power to create change quietly, through example, through grace, through conviction. Her phone buzzed once on the desk. It was a message from an unknown number. When she opened it, she saw a photo of the same framed plaque she had seen earlier, followed by a short message. "Thank you for giving me a second chance to do things right. You changed how I see people and how I see myself." Stephen. Lauren smiled to herself and set the phone down. She didn't reply. She didn't need to. Some lessons didn't require words. They showed themselves in the ripple left behind. As she looked out over the skyline, she thought about her younger self, fresh out of graduate school, uncertain if the world would ever see her for her ability rather than her appearance. She thought about the years it took to build a company from the ground up, the sacrifices no one saw, and the moments when she'd had to sit across from people who doubted her just because she didn't fit their image of success. And now she knew every step of it had led here, to a place where the woman once dismissed at a counter had redefined what that counter stood for. Down on the street below, the last customers were leaving the bank, their reflections flickering across the glass as they passed the new sign outside, Sterling Bank, where every person matters. Lauren leaned back in her chair, her eyes soft. There would be more challenges ahead, more systems to fix, more hearts to reach, but for tonight, she let herself feel proud, not of her title, but of what it meant. Respect had become her legacy, and the world inside those marble walls would never see a customer, or a leader, the same way again.